Welcome and happy Wednesday. Happy AP Psych Day for you all. So, today, if you scroll so you should be in the Google Slides that I post in Google Classroom. So, you will see the agenda for today. So, there's three parts to this, and you are going to be first reviewing units 1 and 2. So, we're going all the way back to the beginning because we are now fully in review mode, seeing as we have finished all the content with the new AP test and its modifications. If you have not done the Do Now yet, please open up the form here. It'll take you to a Google form that's just asking you to check in and tell me how you're doing. Next, I just go over the goals for today's lesson. So the first part of our goals are basically just to review and go over some of the important material from these first few units. So in part 1, you're just doing some review today, actually, just for this first part. You're going to be first watching the review lecture videos, which if you're listening to this, you're already doing. Then you're going to be doing some Quizlet practice questions. So this is the Unit 1 review lecture video. So I'm actually going to go back to our slides from one of the first days of school. So at the beginning of this year, we had to first say, what is psychology? We had a lot of assumptions. You guys made posters, cutouts and pictures, and we began to think about what is this? But the AP psychology test says psychology is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. So there's a lot that goes into that. And it's different from other social sciences like sociology or history or whatever because it focuses on the individual. Again, we're always talking about the individual person. Yes, we talk about how society influences them, but we're always talking about the individual person. I'm going to skip over the pre-scientific psychology stuff here because, to be quite honest, it doesn't really come up. I am going to take a second just to go over this guy again. So Wilhelm Wundt is known as the father of psychology. And he was kind of one of the first people that opened up a lab and began to study why do people do what they do. And some of the things that came out of this and some of the important things that we looked at were some of these new schools of thought. I'm not going to go super into that because the schools of thought were kind of the beginning. But then what we get next is we got those perspectives or approaches. So I'm just going to go through the perspectives and approaches together with you. I'm going to put my computer in present mode just because these are so important in the AP course and on the test because you constantly come back to these things. We've talked about these perspectives in every single unit, right? We say, well, from this perspective, this psychologist might think about it this way, but they might think about it from a different way. We can always look at the same problem, but from a different lens. And that's what these perspectives say. So the first one we're going to look at is, if you remember, we actually did an activity where we used our hand as a mnemonic, meaning a memory tool to help us remember these. So going back through these, we have the behavioral perspective. So behavioral is really focused in on how we learn observable responses. So based on why are we doing this? Because we've seen somebody else do it or because maybe naturally that's just kind of what happens. The next one we have is the biological perspective. And this one, if you remember, we use the hand like a fist because that kind of shows kind of like the brain a little bit. And this perspective is focused on how the body and the brain enable our emotions, our memories, our sensory experiences. So remember, biological isn't just about the brain. It's about all the other things too, like our endocrine system and our senses and things like that. Next, though, we get the brain. We have that pointer finger, I'm thinking about it. And this is the cognitive perspective. Anytime you see that word cognitive, cognate, cognition, it's about thinking, it's about the brain. So this perspective is focused on how we encode, process, store, and retrieve information. Meaning, how do we make sense of it? How do we get it in? How do we make sense of it? How do we keep it there? And then how do we get it out so we can use it again? Next, we have the evolutionary perspective. And as we all know, evolution is all about how we have changed over a very, very long period of time. So this perspective is focused on how natural selection of traits has promoted the survival of genes. Natural selection, again, meaning like how has nature decided what we need to survive and what we don't need to survive. Next, we get the psychodynamic perspective. This one we have the baby sucking a thumb because it's all about how our childhood experiences have really influenced us. This perspective is focused on how behavior springs or comes from our unconscious drives and conflicts. So those things that haven't been resolved. So the psychodynamic, remember, is kind of like an extension of the psychoanalytic, which is the one that Freud was all about. And while he said our unconscious drives and conflicts are all sexually driven or based in anger, the psychodynamics a little bit more like you had childhood conflicts that have then influenced you to be the kind of person that you are. Then we have the social cultural, socio-cultural, sometimes it says social-cultural, same thing. This one is all about how behavior and thinking varies across situations and cultures. So like here we have the ring finger because our ideas about marriage change based on where you grew up, who you were with, what religion you have, things like that. Then we have the humanist perspective. We have two hands reaching out to each other, looking like they're going to help one another because this perspective is focused on how we meet our needs for love and acceptance and achieve self-fulfillment. This one's all about humans are good and they have the ability to be the best versions of themselves when given the circumstances to succeed. So I always associate this perspective too with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, saying if you have love, if you have a home, if you have food, you have all those things, you can get that self-fulfillment, which is the ultimate thing at the top. All right. That's kind of it for Unit 1. It was a short unit. It was only modules 1 through 3. And the big stuff to remember about that one is those different perspectives. So that is a quick overview of Unit 1.